Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Always fun to dig into these stories.
And today we're taking a look at, the legal troubles surrounding Sean Giddy Combs.
Yeah, Diddy, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy. He's had a few names over the years.
He has, and he's been a major player in the music scene for decades, right?
Yeah.
From Bad Boy Records to, his own music career.
For sure, an icon, really. But behind all that success and the hits and the whole image,
Yeah, the bling.
the bling, exactly. There's this kind of a darker story that's unfolding.
Yeah, and it's not just one lawsuit, right? It's like
Right.
this whole wave of accusations coming out.
Yeah, it's a lot, and they paint a pretty disturbing picture when you take them all together. We're talking about allegations of assault, imprisonment, even sexual assault.
Right, and it's not just Diddy himself who's being accused.
No, it goes way beyond him, and that's part of what makes this whole thing so complicated.
Okay, so we've got a lot to unpack here. We've got legal documents, news reports, interviews, all these different sources. Yeah, a whole mountain of stuff.
It's a lot to sift through. So what's the mission for our deep dive today? What are we focusing on?
Well, we're going to break down the lawsuits, of course,
Yeah.
try to make sense of all the legal stuff.
Right, right.
But more importantly, I think we're going to try to connect the dots.
Yeah.
Like, what are the recurring themes here? What does this whole situation tell us about how power works in the music industry?
Especially for, I imagine, artists who are just starting out trying to make it big.
Exactly. They're the ones who are often most vulnerable.
Right, so it's not just about Diddy then. It's about using his case, all these accusations, as a way to understand some bigger issues.
Exactly. A kind of case study, if you will.
I like that. Okay, so where do we even begin with all of this? There's so much to cover.
Well, there's one lawsuit in particular that's got everyone talking.
Okay.
It was filed by a woman who's only being identified as Jane Doe,
Okay.
and it involves a really shocking incident that allegedly happened way back in 2000.
Wow, 2000. That's over 2 decades ago.
It is, yeah. It was at an MTV Video Music Awards after party, hosted by Diddy.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what's being alleged?
Well, Jane Doe claims that she was just 13 years old at the time,
Oh my gosh.
and she says she was drugged and then raped by Diddy and another male celebrity who's not been named.
And this was at his party.
At his party, yeah. And there was another celebrity there, a woman, also unnamed, who she says was present during the assault.
Wow, that's if true, that's incredibly disturbing. That goes way beyond your typical celebrity scandal.
It does. It really does. And the lawsuit goes into a lot of detail about her alleged escape. She says she punched Diddy and then fled the house completely naked.
Oh my God.
It's a really harrowing account, and it adds another layer of complexity to these accusations, which are already really serious.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've got this incredibly serious allegation from 2000, but you mentioned a wave of lawsuits, right? What else is out there?
Right. So just last week, attorney Tony Busby.
Okay, I've heard that name.
Yeah, he's a pretty high-profile lawyer. He filed 6 more lawsuits against Diddy, representing at least 120 alleged victims.
120. Wow.
And that brings the total number of lawsuits against Diddy since November of 2023 to, get this, 24?
24 lawsuits.
That's a lot. And that includes a suit that was settled by his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura.
Yeah, okay. So clearly something's going on here that needs to be looked into. What kinds of things are these other lawsuits alleging?
Well, they range from things like unpaid wages and breach of contract, that sort of thing.
Right, more the business side of things.
Exactly, to much more serious allegations of assault, imprisonment, even death threats.
Wait, death threats? Who's making that allegation?
That's coming from Dawn Richard. She was a member of the girl group Danity Kane,
Oh, right, yeah.
which Diddy formed on that show, Making the Band.
Yeah, I remember that show.
So she's alleging that Diddy imprisoned her, assaulted her, and even threatened to kill her.
Wow. Okay, so before we go any further with this, it's important to note that Diddy denies all of these allegations.
Of course, yes.
His lawyers have released a statement saying that they have full confidence in the judicial process.
Right, right.
And they maintain his innocence. They say he's never sexually assaulted anyone, adult or minor, man or woman.
And, it's crucial to remember that principle of due process.
Absolutely.
Diddy is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law.
Right. And we are in no way implying that he is guilty.
Exactly. But we do have to acknowledge the sheer volume and the seriousness of these accusations.
For sure.
They're impossible to ignore. It's a lot to take in.
It is. It is. So to be clear, what's the difference between all these lawsuits? Some of them are civil, some are criminal.
Good question. Yeah, that can be confusing.
It is. What does it all mean?
So civil lawsuits, like most of the ones filed against Diddy, are brought by individuals who are seeking compensation for damages.
Okay.
Basically, they're saying, you hurt me, and now you owe me something.
Gotcha.
Criminal charges, on the other hand, are brought by the government,
Right.
and those can result in penalties like jail time.
Okay, that makes sense. So are there any criminal charges against Diddy related to these allegations?
Well, that's where things get even more complicated.
Okay.
He's actually currently being held without bail on separate sex trafficking and federal racketeering charges.
Whoa, okay. Those are some serious charges.
They are, and they could carry significant penalties if he's convicted.
Racketeering.
Okay.
I mean, that sounds intense. What does that even mean in this context?
It's kind of a complex legal concept,
Yeah.
but essentially it involves accusations of Diddy being involved in an organized criminal enterprise.
So not just individual acts, but like a whole...
A pattern of behavior, yeah.
Okay.
A system of exploitation potentially spanning years.
Gotcha. So we're not going to get too deep into the legal weeds here.
No, we could do a whole other deep dive on just that.
Yeah, exactly. But it is important to understand that these charges go beyond just individual acts of misconduct. It suggests something much bigger, much more organized.
Right, exactly.
This is getting pretty heavy. Before we move on, I think it's worth pausing for a second.
Yeah, good idea.
You mentioned earlier that this deep dive isn't just about Diddy,
Right.
but about the bigger picture.
The whole system.
How do we even start to connect these lawsuits to the music industry as a whole?
That's where things get really interesting. You know, if these allegations are true, they raise some disturbing questions about the power dynamics that exist behind the scenes in the industry.
Yeah, okay. I'm ready to dive into that. But let's save it for part 2.
Sounds good.
We've covered a lot of ground already.
We have, but that's what we do here, right? Deep dives.
Deep dives, gotta go deep. All right, we'll be back with part 2 in just a bit.
We do. All right, so let's talk about power.
Yeah, power, that's the word that keeps coming up for me.
It is. We've got this iconic figure, Diddy, at the center of all this.
Right.
So what does his story tell us about how power works in the music industry? How does it play out?
Yeah, because he's not just a musician, right? He's like this mogul.
Right, exactly.
He's built an empire, record labels, clothing lines, everything.
Vodka, you name it, he's done it.
Yeah, he's everywhere. And that kind of success, it often comes with a lot of power, right?
For sure, especially in an industry like music, which can be, let's face it, pretty hierarchical.
Yeah, there's definitely like a pecking order.
There is, and it's a tough industry to break into.
Oh, absolutely.
You've got all these aspiring artists hungry for their big break, and then you've got the people in positions of power, the gatekeepers.
The ones who can make or break careers.
Exactly. And that kind of power dynamic, well, it creates opportunities for abuse.
Right. It's not just about music, though, is it?
No, you're right. It's not. We see this in Hollywood, in politics, in all sorts of fields where there's this steep ladder to climb.
Where the stakes are high.
Exactly.
So, in a way, Diddy's story, it becomes this kind of case study.
I think so, yeah.
If these allegations are true, it really shows how power can be used to exploit people.
And to silence them.
Especially the ones who are vulnerable, dependent on those in power.
Yeah, the ones who are afraid to speak up.
Exactly. And it's not just about one individual either.
No, definitely not. We have to look at the whole system that allows this kind of behavior to flourish, to go unchecked.
So it's not just about Diddy. It's about the industry itself.
It's about the culture, the power structures.
Think about Dawn Richards' allegations, right?
Yeah, it's a perfect example.
She's accusing Diddy, the person who basically launched her career, of imprisonment and threats.
It takes a lot of courage to speak out against someone who holds that much power over you.
Oh, yeah, to go up against your mentor, the person who gave you your big break.
And her case, it isn't isolated. Remember Jane Doe?
Yeah, the woman from the 2000 VMAs.
Exactly. She alleges that not only was she assaulted, but that other celebrities were there, and they didn't do anything to stop it.
That's what gets to me, the potential complicity.
It's disturbing.
It really suggests this culture of silence, where people are afraid to speak up, maybe because they're afraid of the consequences.
Or because they're benefiting from the way things are.
Right. They don't want to rock the boat.
It makes you wonder how many people knew about this and just looked the other way.
Yeah, that's a tough question. And what does that say about the industry as a whole?
Right. Is it willing to protect its own, even at the expense of potential victims?
This reminds me of the #MeToo movement a few years back.
Right, yeah.
It started in Hollywood, but it spread everywhere, including the music industry.
It did. We saw this wave of women coming forward.
Sharing their stories of harassment, abuse.
Yeah, it's a watershed moment.
It was, and it really highlighted how these issues are systemic.
They are. They exist across industries, across societies.
It's about power and how it corrupts.
And how it silences those who speak out.
Exactly. So we're seeing this pattern, right? A pattern of alleged abuse.
A pattern enabled by a system that puts power and profit before people.
Before basic human decency, it seems like.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay, but what does this mean for us, for the listeners? Why should they care about all of this?
That's a good question. I think there are a few reasons. First, it's a story about justice.
Okay.
These are really serious accusations, and it's important that they're investigated properly.
Right. We can't just sweep this under the rug because it involves a celebrity.
Exactly. Everyone deserves a fair hearing, both the accusers and the accused.
Absolutely. But it goes beyond the legal stuff, right? This case, it forces us to confront some hard truths.
About the industries we support.
The music we listen to, the celebrities we idolize.
Right, because this is a deep dive. It's not just about Diddy's legal troubles.
It's about the whole underbelly of the entertainment industry.
And it reminds us that the pursuit of fame and fortune, well, it often comes at a cost.
And who pays that cost?
Often it's the most vulnerable. The aspiring artists, the young and impressionable.
The ones with stars in their eyes?
Yeah, the ones who are willing to do almost anything for their shot.
It makes you wonder, what happens to those dreams when they're shattered by abuse?
Yeah, that's the real tragedy here. We're not just talking about lawsuits and settlements, but people's lives.
Their hopes, their aspirations.
The emotional and psychological toll of abuse, it's devastating, and it can last a lifetime.
And we have to remember that for every person who comes forward, there are probably many others who stay silent.
Oh, absolutely.
Because of the fear, the shame, the pressure to protect the industry's image.
It's a lot to carry.
It is. So how do we change that? How do we create a culture where victims feel safe coming forward?
That's the million-dollar question. We need to shift the focus from protecting the powerful to empowering the vulnerable.
And that's everyone's responsibility, right?
It is. Artists, industry execs, fans.
Oh, I'll have a role to play.
We have to stop accepting that's just how it is mentality.
Yeah, that's not good enough anymore.
We have to demand better.
Yeah.
Demand transparency, accountability, justice.
I love that. Okay, so as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
I think it's important to keep asking ourselves these tough questions.
Absolutely. Keep the conversation going.
What does it mean to be a responsible consumer of music? How can we use our voices to advocate for change?
What kind of industry do we want to see in the future?
These aren't easy questions, but they're the right ones to be asking.
They are. Because the future of the industry, the well-being of the people who make the music, it depends on us being willing to engage with these issues.
And to work towards a more just and equitable future for everyone.
Exactly. It's a collective effort.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it really makes you think, how do we reconcile the music we love with the potential darkness behind it?
Right. Can we separate the art from the artist, especially when there are such serious allegations involved?
It's a question a lot of people are struggling with, and it's not an easy one to answer.
No, not at all. But I think it's important to remember that music is created by people.
Of course.
And people are complex.
Right. There's so many layers. It's not just black and white.
No, exactly. We can appreciate someone's talent without, condoning their alleged actions.
But at the same time, it just feels wrong to ignore the accusations and pretend everything's fine.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's where this idea of conscious consumption comes in.
Okay, yeah, explain that.
Well, we have a choice in what we listen to, what we support, who we give our attention to.
You do.
We can choose to support artists who, align with our values, who use their platform to speak out against injustice, who are actively trying to make the industry a better place.
A safer place.
A safer place for sure.
So it's about being intentional with our choices.
Exactly.
And not just in music, but in all parts of our lives, right?
I think so.
We can't change the system overnight.
No, it's a long process.
But we can start with our own behavior.
One step at a time.
One step at a time, yeah. And sometimes that means having tough conversations.
For sure.
Questioning our own assumptions and being willing to hold even our favorite artists accountable.
Yeah, that can be hard.
It is. It can be really uncomfortable.
But it's necessary.
It is if we want to see real change.
If we want to make a difference.
Okay, so we've talked about the lawsuits, the power dynamics, the systemic issues, all of that.
A lot to unpack.
It is, but I want to circle back to something you said earlier.
Okay.
About the music industry being built on dreams.
Yeah.
What happens to those dreams when they're shattered by abuse or exploitation?
That's the real tragedy here, We're not just talking about legal battles or money.
Right.
We're talking about people's lives, their hopes, their aspirations.
Their futures.
Yeah, and the emotional toll of abuse, it can be so damaging.
Oh, absolutely, and it can last for years.
It can. And we have to remember that for every person who comes forward with their story,
yeah,
there are likely many more who stay silent.
Oh, I'm sure, out of fear, shame.
The pressure to protect the industry's image.
It can be a lot to deal with.
It is. It's a heavy burden.
So how do we create a culture where those victims feel safe coming forward, where they're believed and supported?
Well, I think it starts with a shift in focus. We need to stop protecting the powerful and start empowering the vulnerable.
That's a good way to put it.
It's everyone's responsibility.
Artists, execs, fans, all of us.
We have to stop accepting things the way they are.
Stop with the "that's just how it is" mentality.
We have to demand better, demand transparency, demand accountability, demand justice.
I love that. Those are action items.
They are.
And as we move forward, I think it's important to keep asking these tough questions.
Well, for sure.
What does it mean to be a responsible consumer of music? How can we use our voices to advocate for change?
What kind of industry do we want to see in the future?
Yeah. What do we want the future of music to look like?
These aren't easy questions.
No, they're not. But they're important.
The really important ones rarely are.
That's true, because the future of music, the well-being of the artists, it depends on us being willing to grapple with these issues.
And to keep pushing for a more just and equitable future for everyone involved.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been a heavy conversation.
It has.
But an important one.
Really important.
We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much to unpack.
Always more to explore.
Keep learning, keep asking those tough questions, keep pushing for a better music industry.
For everyone.
For everyone. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.